The name's Maxwell. Francis Maxwell. I can't even keep a straight face doing that. Welcome back to My Take. Francis Maxwell here, and this is my take on Spectre. So thanks everyone for the majority of the positive comments, I would say, on my Legend review. I did read them. Thanks again for that. So I'm back, and I am reviewing what was said to be Daniel Craig's last Bond movie. Okay, so I'm going to mix things up with the format. I'm going to first highlight the flaws that I thought were prominent in this movie, and then go on to explain what I liked about it. One flaw: too long. Far too much airtime in there, in which I felt they were just showcasing aesthetically pleasing shots just to fill those minutes. Nonetheless, I knew what I was getting myself into because I have been a Bond fan for years. Grew up watching Bond, read the novels, love everything to do with James Bond, so I knew what I was coming into. People are saying it's not in comparison to Skyfall, which, by the way, isn't even the best of Daniel Craig's. It's Casino Royale. My view, Casino Royale, Skyfall, Quantum of Solace. Then I think that Spectre's last. Not saying that it's... I think it might be better than Quantum of Solace, actually. Yeah, I think it goes third for me. The one thing I keep hearing from all these reviews, the character arc. The character arc. It's James Bond. The character arc is known. He's known as the character. Now, I understand Casino Royale, it gave you the character arc because you have to introduce the new Bond. It was a fantastic movie. Probably one of my favourite of all time. Quantum of Solace, there's nothing wrong with it. It's what you expect from a James Bond. A lot of bangs, a lot of booms, a lot of fighting, a lot of nice shots. Not his best told storyline, I would say, as Casino Royale. But I knew that that's what James Bond is there to do, is to please that persona of the character of James Bond, continue it on, and obviously give you some of what the things that you expect. But if it's got a good storyline, then that's all part and parcel of it. I'm not saying every Bond movie is good, but I understand what I'm getting myself into, so I won't criticise it for character arcs. I think that this character arc story was set up from the first movie onwards. Skyfall was its own animal. I loved the way it was shot, but it took you back to his roots, which I like, so it took you back to Scotland. Nonetheless, it portrayed this kind of melodrama of James Bond and took you back to his childhood and things that went wrong there, and really dug deep into the character of James Bond. So when you're basically outroing Daniel Craig, if people are complaining that that character arc was not the same as Skyfall, you have to outro it in a way that fits with that story arc. You have to outro it in a way that he can go away, because you've created that animal. You created this drama of James Bond, which has rarely been there. It's all about the silver tongue, it's all about the suaveness, it's all about his detective side, his action sequences. That's what James Bond is. He is a legend in that way. So if you're creating this melodrama of his deep, dark emotions, you have to round it out in a way. So that wasn't a problem for me, the way they outroed it. This is one of the most typical James Bond movies I've seen. It looked fantastic. The opening sequence was great. The fight scenes were, for me, some of the best from James Bond. There's one scene in particular that reminds me of a Sean Connery Bond. He goes to what, I think it's a ski resort, and he's involved in a fight sequences. He punches one security guard, and he just looks at the other and goes, "Stay." That's James Bond. That's the myth of James Bond. He's got such a charisma about him, such an aura, that people are afraid of him, but also curious to know about him. The one-liners that were criticised, a little bit too cheesy. No, I loved the whole thing. I loved the way James Bond was portrayed in this. Don't think it was Daniel Craig's best acting, but nonetheless, it was still pretty good. So that was the only flaw, and then the positives for it, for me, it gave me what I expected from a James Bond movie. If you're in there complaining about how he has done things, which I have seen, how did he blow up the building with one shot to a valve? How does he run around in a tailored suit and not rip it? Because I've done it in a drunken night out and it's ripped. Trust me, I know that. So there's certain things at James Bond, you just can't look at it in terms of logistics, because he does things that no one expects, because that is James Bond. He defies things that you shouldn't expect someone to be able to do. That's what his persona was written on. That's what was created. Now, the next point. I base a lot of my views on movies, specifically James Bond movies, on the villains. Christoph Waltz coming into this role, I was excited. For anyone that complained about his screen time, did you not think the name of the movie gave it away? The fact is, I don't want to spoil it. I'm not going to say the character's name, but just do some research. If you know James Bond, what Spectre stands for, who's the leader of Spectre, what you expected from this character. Now, this character, who Christoph Waltz plays, they put a new twist on it, which was to kind of create this full circle, which I thought was okay. It wasn't like, I see. It was just, okay, it's a new spin on it. I knew because of the name who the character was going to be, and I had no problem with Christoph Waltz playing this character. But to complain about the screen time of Christoph Waltz, do you know who the character he's playing? Do you know who that is? Every scene he was in, he chewed it up. He was fantastic. He was captivating in every way. But the character that he played was, in a couple of occasions, not even credited and was left anonymous in the scene. That's why it was in this eerie feeling whenever he was on the screen. That scene when James Bond walks into the group of bad guys sitting on the table, and with Bautista came in and just destroyed people. He was so captivating in that scene, Christoph Waltz. The way he just sits there, doesn't say a word, please don't let me disrupt, continues, and then when you expect him to talk and address the assassin in front of him, nice to see you, James, completely knows of everything around him, face not showing. I thought that was brilliant. If you're complaining about the screen time, I'm afraid you're watching the wrong movie. So, overall, for my thoughts on the movie, right, to get to all the good stuff, it went a little bit too long, yes. I thought the action sequences were some of the best we've seen. They definitely showcased the budget they had. That scene with the plane where it comes down the ski ramp sort of thing, its wings come off and it's just flying still down. He can still navigate the plane perfectly well because that's what James Bond does. It all was amazing to me. I wasn't coming into this movie expecting to see another drama like Skyfall, because you're outronning it so that someone else can come in and continue the Bond name. Continue this aura. If you were to build a character arc every time James Bond was to come into fruition, this is someone who's lost like 200 girlfriends in his life. He's got a lot of demons to fight. It would be a very big character arc to portray. That's why the movies often played off as individual entities. They rarely would kind of go into a different movie. They rarely connect. Daniel Craig's portrayal, they took that perspective. They took that kind of continuation throughout the movies, and it worked well. Trust me, Skyfall was a good movie, but I didn't come into this movie expecting to see another Skyfall and another melodrama and another deep, dark journey into the roots of James Bond. This is kind of reminds me of what James Bond, this almost could have been one of the first portrayals. He's suave, he's smooth talking, he uses his gadgets, he's a fantastic fighter, he finds himself in the situations that you don't expect. One scene, he's there, next minute he's driving through the streets of Rome in the Aston Martin. That's James Bond for me. So, as much as I don't think it lived up to Casino Royale or Skyfall, but I still think it's probably better than Quantum of Solace, which again, didn't think was a bad movie. I just knew what I was getting into with James Bond. It's still better than a lot of the Pierce Brosnan movies for me. I didn't think Pierce Brosnan was a bad James Bond. I don't think anyone's Sean Connery, maybe just my Scottish bias, you may agree. But nonetheless, I still enjoyed it. And as for my take on it, my review, I'm still going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. It seems to be my go-to number. But I tend to look at the positive side of movies. I love the James Bond franchise, as you guys call it in America, the James Bond series. So I still enjoyed it thoroughly. That was my take. Hit me in the comment section below. Let me know what you think of my horrible James Bond impersonation at the start. Get me on Twitter at Francis_Maxwell. And look out for more My Takes.